I'm Kate Nash, writer and founder of Purple Space. We are delighted to collaborate with MSD, known as Merck, in the US and Canada on this Authenticity series, a collection of 7 conversations with extraordinary colleagues about their experiences of disability and work. It can be difficult to work for a large corporation and talk about your disability experience. That's true in the pharmaceutical industry and indeed across the full range of organisations that we work with at Purple Space. In publishing these conversations, MSD wants to help normalise the experience of disability by sharing the stories of colleagues with both direct and indirect experience of disability. In so doing, MSD aims to help colleagues with disabilities and allies to build resilience and trust, to make it easier for them to share their stories and, when it is required, request the adjustments or the accommodations they need to thrive. In this conversation, we meet Jennifer Zachary. Jennifer, known as Jay-Z to her friends and colleagues, is Executive Vice President and General Counsel at Merck, known as MSD outside of the United States and Canada. At Merck, Jennifer leads global legal strategy, ethics and compliance, safety and environment, and security functions. During her career, Jennifer has held senior roles at the law firm Covington and Burlington, the FDA, and US Attorney's Office. A science major, a turned attorney, Jennifer made the leap to law after realizing she craved connection and impact beyond the lab. Her story is one of blending science, service, and leadership into a remarkable legal journey. We offer our thanks to Jennifer for sharing her insights on mental health and work so that others might learn from her experiences. I hope you enjoy listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. So hello everybody and welcome. I'm here today talking to the wonderful Jennifer Zachary. Hi Jennifer, how are you?
Hello Kate, I am well. It's great to be chatting with you.
Yeah, really looking forward to our conversation. Now, I just introduced you and I've given a little flavour of who you are in your career, but this is really to give this some life and some colour. So I wonder if we could start with an opening question about how mental health challenges have affected your professional journey, your personal story, either directly or indirectly through colleagues and employees. What does that mean for you?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I think mental health challenges, they are just a fact of life, professional, personal, otherwise. I mean, who among us has not been affected, I would say repeatedly, by mental health challenges? If there's a person out there who's been fortunate enough to not have that happen, I'd be surprised. So I can point to countless examples across my life where I've been affected and people who I love have been affected. So maybe just to give a couple to start us off, I would say that, I'm a lawyer by training, and I went to law school at Harvard. And it is an incredibly stressful place. I'd come there from a science background in college. And suddenly I'm in this environment where all that matters is reading and analyzing case law and writing about it. So completely different, I'm sort of, in a new environment. And I'm also surrounded by everyone else who's one of my classmates is also the smartest person in their college. And so the feelings of anxiety and inadequacy, they could be overpowering part of the time. And at final exam period, I saw people all around me breaking down. And you know what we figured out pretty quickly in that first year of law school, my classmates and I, is that you have to support each other. Community was the only way through that experience. And that was actually a really good life lesson for me because I've put it into effect then multiple times. Like I think about the COVID pandemic lockdown. That was an incredibly challenging time for a lot of people. And I'm among those people. I had been at our company for less than 2 years. I'm living alone, except for my cat, in my tiny apartment in New York City. And New York was one of those cities in the United States at the beginning of the pandemic that was hit hard, and it was hit early, and it was really scary. I just felt completely isolated. I am quite a social person, and so I was not doing well in that environment. And I would speak to others at the company in phone calls or one-off situations, and I realized, much like law school, there were other people who were struggling alongside me. And so one day, just, I sent this email to our whole organization. It wasn't a fancy, polished communications email, just an email from my heart out to my organization, just that kind of said, look, I'm struggling. Does anyone have anything you can share with me? And I got to tell you, Kate, the response was unbelievable. Like, I got back from people pictures of their pets, funny stories about what was going on, good recipes they've been making, and it gave me this window into everyone else's lives. Frankly, I think it made our whole organization so much stronger as a team. And so I would say that the lesson for me from that and from the numerous other experiences I've had is that there cannot be any stigma around mental health challenge. Everyone experiences some challenge, and some of us more than others. So what's important is making sure you surround yourself with people who are positive, who create a supportive environment, and who you can count on sort of coming in and providing you with compassion and understanding.
Tracy, that is so powerful. And of course, as you share that story, our minds go back to those very challenging times. And that's quite a courageous thing to do, to be out there and loud and to describe what you're feeling and going through. Did you learn anything about yourself? Is that something that you've done before? And what were the types of reactions that you got? How did people receive that?
One of the things that I learned was that, I was a young leader to have a role like I have in this company. And one of the things that I learned is there is tremendous strength in vulnerability. Once I exposed that part of myself and said, you know what, I'm not doing that well. So many other people were there to support me, and it made me a better, stronger leader to show that side of myself. And so I think what that taught me was just that we're all people, we're all humans. And sometimes we put on this facade of like, I'm an executive, or, I do this and I come to the office, and, we all are a cauldron of all these things going on inside of us. And it taught me that acknowledging that and being transparent about that actually gets you a lot more respect and a lot more support from your colleagues.
Yeah, wonderful. Tracy, I want to build on this and drawing on your personal and your professional experiences. You think about the great organization that you work for. And at Purple Space, we have the very great pleasure of working with the Capability Network and have seen the most incredible impact over time. So as you look across your organization, what steps do you think organizations could and should do to create a more inclusive environment and a more supportive environment for people who maybe experience mental health challenges, or indeed more broadly than that?
Yeah. I think to build on the conversation we've been having, I think that the most important thing that we can do to support employees with disabilities, especially mental health disabilities, is to have a proactive and community-driven approach where we're all in it together. So that means what? One, awareness, early intervention and prevention programs, and then 3, an environment of acceptance and mutual support. So at our company, we focus on building awareness and empathy. And because that's incredibly important. And, you can go about doing that a lot of different ways. But I think one of the most important things that you have to do is help your employees who don't have disabilities learn about the experiences of colleagues who do have disabilities, because that's just how the human mind works. To really get empathy, you have to be able to understand. We do that in a lot of different ways. One small example, it's kind of a sneaky, powerful one that I love, is that we put on our internal news site that we all read every day, we put stories and we feature people who have disabilities. One that kind of sticks in my mind that was a favorite is a colleague of ours who, again, going back to the pandemic, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder 2. And her psychiatrist told her that in addition to medication, that other forms of treatment are really important, things like exercise and diet, even art and hobbies. And so she did her own research. A lot of disabled people are really resilient. She does her own research, and she figures out that service dogs are also a possibility for people who have psychiatric conditions. And so our HR team worked with her to accommodate having a dog on site, which can be tricky with manufacturing and research labs, but got it all worked out. And now if she has a panic attack or experiences anxiety, the dog like lays its head on her and cuddles its body next to her. Like, just hearing her description was amazing. And now her colleagues too say that this service dog is like an important part of the team. Other than having to try to resist petting the dog because it's working, they just see the service dog as a net advantage for everyone. And so I think stories like that, and then you hear from the person's colleagues, they really build that understanding and that community, right? That meaningful support foundation that we all need. There are a number of other resources that we have available that I can go into if you'd like, but that's just kind of one small example of how we're trying to build that empathy in people.
Yeah. Storytelling is such a powerful mechanism, isn't it? It allows people to see themselves and to, I suppose, start to scenario scan the things that they can do a bit differently in order to be accommodated at work.
Yes, I think that's right.
Your own personal strategies, Jennifer, when you think back and you're very candid about your experiences personally and professionally, what are the types of things that you do to, preserve and protect your brand, but also your health?
Yeah. I think it's the same as the things I would say that I always recommend to my team. So it's about awareness and it's about openness. So I try to monitor sort of what's going on in my life. What are possible triggers? What's going to be stressing me? Like right now, I'm going through a move. While at the same time, we're incredibly busy at the company. And just knowing that I have instability on my personal life and combined with, a lot of work, it's like, I've said to myself, whoa, we need to make sure this weekend that we make time to go for a run. We make time to see a friend for brunch, sort of taking a conscious approach to my mental health and making sure that I'm sort of feeding that and giving myself that space. Another really important thing that I think that it's hard for people who are hard charging, and we have a lot of us in our company, and it's great. But if you're hard charging, sometimes it's difficult to give yourself grace. And that is incredibly important, to acknowledge, one, that we're going to go through times where we feel unstable, where we're having mental health challenge, but then to also say, it's okay. Like, that is perfectly fine. And I'm going to make mistakes all over the place. And so long as I recognize that and I move forward, I'm going to give myself grace. I'm not going to beat myself up, and I'm just going to move forward. So for me, right now I'm spending a lot of time carving out some summer vacation plans. When we get busy, one of the things that goes by the wayside is that division between our personal lives and our professional lives. But in reality, it's incredibly important to rejuvenate, right? And you get that when you sort of push yourself outside of work and just take that time, have that breath. I want to go see my family out west. I want to do some hiking. I'm really excited about it. So we're planning a trip to do that. And I'm going to try to be on my email as little as possible and leave one of my colleagues to mind the store. And I'm going to do the same thing for her when it's her turn to go out. So those are some of the strategies. But I think that the key is being conscious and giving yourself grace.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Wise words, Jennifer. And I think all of us in our careers have at times been so busy or experienced a moment where we've lost sight of some of the things that we need to keep us human and keep us real and keep us healthy. Yeah. Building on that, give us some thoughts about how employees can communicate effectively their own mental health needs to their employers. It could be to their colleagues. It can be incredibly difficult, as we know, to actually ask for the adjustments or the accommodations that we might need. Have you got any thoughts about how others can ask and the types of resources and accommodations that Merck MSD have offered its employees over time?
Yeah, I would say that this is an area where if we are candid with ourselves as a company, there's always opportunity to improve, right? Because, you want to make this process, to your point, it can be really hard and really scary once you've gotten past that point of like, oh, I think there's something I need, to actually reach out and ask for that, because you don't know, how am I going to be evaluated? Is someone going to judge me because I need this thing? And so what we really need to do, and we always need to keep working on this, is make that process as friction-free and as not scary as possible. And so I think the first requirement is that we have to have clear and open communication so that people feel like they can share their mental health needs and request accommodations. And so right now, the way we do that, the first thing is having this accessible process you can access on the internet to sort of get things kicked off. We try to make it pretty intuitive and fairly supportive so that employees feel empowered to speak up and sort of advocate for their well-being. We want to make sure we do this so that we're building that trust and encouraging the employee at the outset, because otherwise we worry that we lose people along the way, right? And if they're not asking for what they need, they're not as productive as they could be, they're not as happy as they could be, and we risk that they will leave us at some point, which is absolutely the worst outcome. And so we have this comprehensive accommodation process that I think really reflects the support that we believe we are committed to giving our colleagues. It begins with the employee's request through this hopefully intuitive system, but then it's immediately followed up by this collaborative effort that involves their manager, senior management, HR, legal if necessary. Sort of we pull everyone together. We don't leave it on the employee to do it, right? We have this process in place, pull everyone together and figure out how we can hear what's needed, think creatively, and then put that in place. And it's really important that we do this quickly so that we demonstrate, our commitment to getting this person what they need when they've taken the time to speak up. And they also need to really see that we've been fair and that we've taken meaningful action. And, and whatever conclusion and whatever accommodation we put in place, that it makes sense. And it's really setting the employee up to truly thrive.
JC, that's really very powerful. One of the things that we see at Purple Space is how necessary it is to have a visible, open, easy to use workplace adjustment accommodation and adjustment service. And what you're describing is, and I know you'll be on your journey. I have never met an organization that says we can't continue to improve and get better and so on. And I'm sure you're amongst that. But what you're describing are what I would call the essential elements, because it can be enormously hard for people to identify with the experience of disability or mental ill health. So a big high five on that. I want to move on to trust and resilience. And again, it may be that you want to draw a little from your own experience. Jennifer, you have had and continue to have quite an extraordinary career. I wonder if you could offer our listeners your thoughts about the role of resilience in managing mental health for people with disabilities, and how can organizations help in building that inner confidence, building that resilience over time?
Yeah. Resilience is a tricky thing. And almost to me, sometimes it can be like a hot button word. And I'll tell you why I think that. I think resilience is incredibly important. As we were talking about earlier, we all struggle with things and we need to recognize that. We need to give ourselves grace and we need to move forward. Sometimes I feel like resilience is thrown up as like a challenge to the person who's experiencing this thing. Like, oh, you need to be resilient. And that to me is really toxic and completely misses the point. And so I know you, Kate, you mean it in the first sense of how I'm asking it. But I do always want to flag for people when they're talking about resilience that there's always some vague element that can switch that into like a blame game. And so for me, like when I think about resilience, it's different for everyone, but I know it's foundational. It's foundational for us to manage our own mental health, and it's foundational for an organization to recognize the amount of resilience that's required for employees with disabilities, especially mental health disabilities, to navigate, through our work environment and all the different layers of stress. And it's really important that organizations recognize we have a role to play in cultivating resilience, in giving people the tools and the space where they can be very intentional about their own wellness. So, we have a number of resources that are available to people, but it requires people to jump in and take those opportunities, right? And that to me is a sign of resilience. When you're at the stage in your personal mental health journey where you can take advantage of the resources and jump right in. One of the programs that I love that we offer that I find is just so nice because it's just a discrete commitment is we have this mindful minutes program. It's a live 15-minute mindfulness session. And it's just a great example of something that we can all fit into our day, right? I mean, it's 15 minutes. It's like skip my third cup of coffee of the day and do this instead. And just have a moment where you focus inward, right? And then you can bring back out into the world your resilient self. But it's important to take advantage of the opportunities, and doing that requires resilience and an organization that supports people as they're building that resilience.
Wonderful. Do you know, Jennifer, I was reading the other day that we should aim for just 1% improvement in our day. Quite often when we want to improve and to get stronger, we feel that it's a big task. Whereas if we go for 1%, it's 14 minutes of our day. So as you say,
Yeah.
just a mini chunk can help us to do better and go further. I love this. Building on this, Jennifer, in terms of the theme of resilience and building trust, I know you're a huge fan of employee resource groups within the firm. Some of the things that you've seen in terms of open communications and the different initiatives that employee resource groups, business resource groups can bring to the process of building communication and trust and resilience.
Yeah. And I did not want to get through this conversation without giving huge props to our capability network. That is our employee business resource group who focus on disability advocacy and particularly mental health. They have tons of amazing services. So they offer, and I love their events. Like, just the energy of this group is so awesome and supportive. But they do a lot around peer support. They have resources for our colleagues who have disabilities or chronic illnesses, but they also focus a lot on caregivers, which I feel like is also an area that's often neglected. They're doing a lot to bring awareness around neurodivergent individuals. I think that that's an area that has long been misunderstood. And then they're good. Like, I sort of, we talk about allyship, but I feel like the Capability Network just brings together friends, just like I said, this great energy of people who are all thinking about the way that we can contribute individually with our individual characteristics. And they create this safe space for people to connect and to share stories. As we talked about, storytelling is so powerful, right? And they also, I think, do an excellent job of pushing our company to get better every day and giving us examples and opportunities, highlighting areas where the members of the network are encountering that friction that I said we try to avoid. And they flag those up for us so that we can be even more inclusive. And I think that any organization, if they have a group like the Capability Network, they're going to be so far ahead in terms of trying to help and support employees with disabilities and with mental health support.
I love it, Jennifer. We have the great pleasure of working with Jean Coe and Hilary Reagan, and they are phenomenal individuals who are leading the charge along with their committee members. I can't name them all, but they are all differently brilliant. Daisy, what about your role? You hold a unique place. As an executive sponsor, you're uniquely placed, I suppose, to lean in and support and advocate for mental health awareness. What do you see as your role? What do you enjoy about your role as exec sponsor?
Yeah, I love to advocate for mental health awareness and support with employees with disabilities. I think that is really important. But it's not enough to just use words, right? We have to demonstrate that commitment. And again, a lot of the accommodation process sits with my organization, it sits with HR. So rolling up my sleeves and making sure that I'm actively involved and I understand how that process is working and where there are opportunities for improvement, I think is really important just within the confines of my job. But then I think more broadly, as just a leader within this organization, it is really important that I actively model a commitment to mental health wellness, because you feel like if you're the only one, that it's not a safe space, and that cannot be the case. And I give a lot of credit to other colleagues of mine on the executive team and other managers within our company have participated in events with Capability Network and others where they've talked about their own mental health challenges and remove the stigma. Like, these are incredibly accomplished people. I think it's really important to remember that, the rates of mental illness coincide really well with aptitude and intellect and all of those other things. So, there are a lot of us out there who are working through challenges. And so it's really important as a leader to make it clear that is the case, right? You don't have to pretend, you don't have to have the facade. I think about like one of the trends that you see online about like CEO podcasts and other influencers, and they talk about like, oh, I start my morning at the gym, or I go for a run, I do a cold plunge, and they talk about how important that is for physical well-being. I would love to see more of a focus, and I think as a leader, I can do more of this, not just on your physical fitness, which is important. Mental health wellness is part of that physical fitness, but I would like to see us be really candid about the fact that all of those efforts, those routines, all those other things, we should be doing that for our mental health as well. Like the, mindful minutes I was talking about before, all of those things are part of what makes us a healthy human being.
Wonderful stuff. Jennifer, I'm just absorbing that and reflecting. You highlight sometimes very, very simple, but very powerful and sometimes very difficult things for execs to do. You mentioned the necessity to take it upon yourself to actually understand the workplace accommodation and adjustment process. Quite often it's seen as special and different and over there, but the fact that you're leaning into that process, and equally to be, brave and courageous to talk about our lived experiences of mental ill health. It is not easy, but a very powerful move that you do that. Wonderful. Now, we could be here till midnight, apparently. Well, I'd like to keep you here till midnight. However, so a couple more questions before we close. Just looking out to the future, we live in challenging times, across the pond, in every parts of the pond, there's challenges on diversity, equity and inclusion. Here in the UK, there is a push for welfare reform, and different parts of the world will see challenges in this space. But just looking at the future, what do you envisage as the future of mental health support in the workplace? I think particularly for employees with disability, or what would you like to see? What changes would you like to see?
I think we're going to continue to see more awareness and less stigma. And those two things alone are going to ensure that we have success in this space. I think that especially in some ways, the pandemic was really helpful in making it much easier for everyone to talk about challenge, because basically all of us had some challenge during that time period. But I think also, and this is a hope, I think technology could possibly continue to play a bigger role in our lives, especially with mental health. I've happened to focus a lot on we call the FDA regulated space in the United States, medicines, medical devices and things. And one of the really hot topics is the use of digital and artificial intelligence for mental health support. And they're working on all kinds of phone apps and different things that can be helpful. And so, through our employee assistance programs, we're embracing all these different digital mental health platforms, trying a lot of different ones to see, what's the best. But I think the real advantage of this technology, what it might be able to provide for us, is that it's going to meet individual needs in a way that's often hard for programs to do, but also on-demand support. You never know when that moment is going to come, and you need that help, or you just need that little bit of a touch. And you can do that through an app. You can do that through teletherapy, even virtual reality experiences that help people to sort of, progress with their mental health. And so, sometimes I worry like the robots are going to take everything over, but I think this is an opportunity for technology to really help folks with their mental health, and to do it on a schedule that actually works with real life.
I love it, Jennifer. And, one can see your infectious enthusiasm. We know that technology can be a force for good as well as a force for not so good. But what you're tapping into is the necessity for us to feel the innovation and feel the creativity and the huge power that technology has for us to share our lived experiences and our storage, which makes the world a smaller place. Wonderful. Yes. Wonderful. So as we start to close, your thoughts about advice or hints or tips, the thoughts that you would have to give other executives who are looking to improve the mental health support within their organizations and inclusivity. What wise words would you offer them in their own journeys?
Yeah, first I would congratulate them on recognizing that wanting to provide mental health support and inclusivity is absolutely a requirement of their job. If you're a good manager, that is something that you are doing. So I congratulate them on, on wanting to advance in that journey. And I think the things that I would say to them, maybe the first thing is, let's remember how important it is to lead by example. And leading doesn't mean just talking about it, although that's a great first start. It means actively modeling it. It means telling your team about the vacation you plan to take, you just got back from. It means, all sharing of yourself at work, so everyone feels like they're comfortable, they're able then to be open and to ask for support when they need it. Another thing I would say is that it's really important that we as managers make inclusion like a team sport. Everyone has a role in creating an inclusive environment, and it's not enough for just the manager to do that. It has to be the whole team. It has to be, like we were talking about before, everyone who is happy to have the service dog around, right? They're all part of the team, and they create that empathetic and supportive culture where our colleague could thrive. It's also really important that we be proactive and we be transparent. If we see someone who we think is struggling, approach them, help them get to that point where we talked about earlier, where they can be resilient and take advantage of the resources. Extend a lifeline to them and say, look, I want to work with you, and here's some resources, and we're going to get through this together. I'm invested in you. I know what a great employee you are, and I know that we can get through this together and find, the perfect set of accommodations that can let you be your most productive. And maybe the last thing is, and this kind of ties in with the transparency, is we have to remove barriers to communication. We really have to make it feel safe for employees to tell us what they need, what they want, what they're struggling with, and then point them in the direction of the tools and be open to having new tools if they aren't the right tools for them. So I think that those things are what's really important for us to do as leaders, so that we have these great teams and that we keep these incredibly talented employees and keep them at their full productivity.
Wonderful. Jennifer, you are an amazing individual, and it is a joy to meet you and hear your story and hear your ideas, your thoughts, and indeed your influence to support other executive leaders to do the right thing so that it's good for business and good for Purple Talent. So thank you for your time, your energy, and your infectious enthusiasm for our community. It means a lot, Jay-Z. So thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you for this conversation. I loved it. And thank you for making awareness and empathy an important part of what we are all having a conversation about.
Wonderful.